Hey, gang, welcome back to Bits of the Backline Comedy Podcast, your Omaha podcast that explores the writing and development of comedy bits. Before we get started, everyone, I'd like to address our audience. I'd like to speak directly to you, the viewer. You, the viewer, should know something. You should know that you are not a human doing, not a human knowing. You're a human being. And as a human being, you have opposable thumbs. And with those opposable thumbs, we'd like you to smash like, subscribe, tell your friends about Bits at the Backline in case you have anybody in your life that needs to know more about stand-up comedy. I'm your host, Josh Prentice. This guy to my right is the co-host with the most. He's the Jim Halbert to my Creed Bratton. Put your hands together for a young man that brushes his teeth with talent.
Oh, thank you.
He's got so much of it. Give it up for Caleb Jones.
Oh, please. Too much. You're too kind. I love being the Jim Halbert to your Creed Bratton. Amazing. So, our special guest for this episode, to my right over here, she is a lot of things. She is accomplished in so many different ways. A professor, teacher, author, agent of kindness, TEDx talker, podcaster, Ferial Pearson, everyone. Please help me welcome Ferial to the show.
Gosh, thank you. It's great to be here.
You know, no joke. I was very much, I was doing some writing before the episode to try to prepare. And I was like running through a list of like, well, I've got to cover everything that Ferial does. This is a long list.
It's a lot.
Yeah, there was a lot under your belt for sure. I mean, that's fantastic.
You have 2 professors worth of productivity. Thanks
for saying that. Would you tell the committee so that they can give me tenure in a couple years?
Yes, I'll reach out to them. You don't even have to ask for a recommendation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here with us, Ferial.
Yeah.
We're very excited to talk with you. I've been in doing research, getting more and more excited for being able to have a conversation with you and just get to know a little bit more about your craft, about comedy, what you've done and created, just a lot of your work. We want to really try to cover a lot of different aspects of what you've been up to and how you go about doing things, and we really want to dig into that. I'm just going to jump in and ask you some questions. I was here a couple weeks ago at your set, and I watched that. I thought it was amazing. I had a ton of fun watching you up there. It's nothing like, absolutely, nothing like watching a comedian who's, really got their stuff down. And there was something in your set that really stuck out to me. And I feel like something I've noticed across your work, obviously you have this focus on kindness and what that means and maybe what we should do with it. And I wanted to begin by asking you a pretty broad question, but I think it might give us some insight. How would you define kindness, and what do you, when you think of kindness, what does that mean to you?
Well, first of all, it is not unkind to make bigots uncomfortable. So
There
let's just start with that.
you go, right off the bat.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I have been hate crimed a couple of times, and when I speak up about it and tell my lived experiences and share like the hate messages and the death threats that I get, people are like, "You're putting people in danger. Aren't you supposed to be the kindness lady? Is it really kind to talk about this stuff?" And I'm like, it's unkind to sweep it under the rug and let hate crimes go, unanswered. So no. So we'll start with that. It is kind to speak up when bigotry is happening. But I think kindness is basically connecting with humanity. I think it's thinking about others as your family, even if they're not the same background as you, not the same, even nationality or ethnicity or anything like that. Like, to me, as an immigrant, my family lives across the world, thousands of miles away, and I need family wherever I go. So I have found family, and I think of everywhere I live as my community and my family. So kindness to me is making sure everyone around me is happy, healthy, well-fed, has access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, not the prostitute of happiness, as one of my students talked about. He used spell check correctly.
He did spell it correctly, like you said.
He did spell it correctly. But really, like, truly making sure, when you say the pledge that, liberty and justice for all really means for all, and not just some people who are a certain hue or a certain faith or all of that kind of stuff. So to me, kindness really is social justice. It's not separate from that. I am very... I very much like the idea of like
when I was listening to you during your set and when I've been doing some research, I definitely got the idea that, you weren't like, just like, oh, well, I'm just nice to everyone, or something like, no, like there's a lot of strength in what you're saying. I think a lot of like, I can tell. And, I found a news article with News 3, I believe, about what happened in small town, Nebraska. And, it's nice to hear you say like, yeah, I mean, kindness is more than just being nice to everybody, like, no, it's it's not unkind to call out a bigot,
Right.
I think there's a lot of power in that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean,
Tell all your friends. Tell all your friends.
yes, exactly. Just like with consent,
With
tell all your
consent.
friends.
Tell everybody.
There was a feature of your work that I found most notable in this regard. Like, your set is structured, that we'll listen to in a moment, is structured in such a way where you start out with like kind of a punch that is, my last name was Ferial Muhammad, but I met my husband and changed it because Muhammad autocorrects to terrorist.
That's correct.
And this is, I think a joke that is surrounded in your work by this kind of then cognitive elaboration for like, hey, this is who I am. This is like where I come from. But there's really that kind of dichotomy of like this fierceness in regard to the things that you really care about, but then also a very kind of pastoral way of doing things. And in fact, we saw this, we've seen this with other comedians as well, where they will do the same thing in order to introduce, subjects that maybe, predominantly white audience or an audience that's 50% white or whatever might be like more uncomfortable discussing or kind of hearing about. So I guess I'm curious if if you do that consciously, does that writing style or using that approach, in this case especially, I mean, was it just natural, or did you meditate on how you wanted to, kind of offer both the open hand and the closed hand, as it were?
I think it just comes naturally. I haven't been doing comedy very long. I think I did like 2 sets before the pandemic hit, and then there was the pandemic. Did a few things online. So the terrorist one actually just came out of nowhere. So literally right before the show, I thought I should say that, and then I did.
Wow.
So I'm glad it worked. But I think it comes from, growing up with being an outsider in many different parts of my life, even before I came to the United States, because I got here when I was 19, but I've always been a minority within a minority. Our family's always been a minority within a minority. Even the type of Muslim we are, a lot of people say, you're not really Muslim. So all of that kind of, or being a person who has a little bit of African ancestry in the, in the Indian community, they're like, you're not really one of us. So, having all of these different marginalizations that happen, bad things happen. And so in my family, we've always had this like dark sense of humor about things where you either laugh about it or you're going to be sitting in a corner crying and rocking, and nothing gets done. My mom had a much more difficult background, growing up in dire poverty. My parents went through the Civil War because we didn't get independence from the British till 1963. My parents were like 9 and 10 years old at that point. And so I grew up with that modeled for me. Like we laugh at everything, even though things are sad and scary and dark. But also, I found in my teaching that when I'm teaching difficult subjects, because I've always had to do that, bringing some lightness to it helps people kind of let their guard down and listen. Because if you're talking about something in a scary way, then a wall goes up, and you're not going to hear anything after that. So I feel the need always to connect with my audience first, so that wall comes down, and then they'll listen to what I have to say. And so they know that, hey, I'm a human being just like y'all, and have the feelings and the emotions just like y'all. And so, we can connect in that way, and you can see me as a human being first, and then everything else. I don't want them to ignore the differences. We want to celebrate those, but see me as somebody who connects to you first, and then we can talk about the tough stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads into another question. When you're up there doing stand-up, and you said you were relatively new.
Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because I believe I saw you. We had a student showcase of some films here,
Yeah.
and I think that was the first time I saw you, and I just assumed you'd been doing this for years.
That was
you
my
remember
first
our
show
conversation?
ever.
Yeah,
that was my first show ever.
No way.
Yeah.
That is insane.
I was terrified. I wore a long dress. I'm like, they can't see my knees shake if I wear a long dress, you know? So.
Do you remember the conversation we had out front in the lobby? Yeah, because I was like, hey, how's it going? And I said, you're a comic, you know, and I was just trying to find everybody. And you said, well, actually, this is my first time. And then I
struck fear into your heart. You're like, great, it's got this newbie in here.
But then you said, I'm an educator. I had known that you're an educator. And then I was just like, it should be fine. Like, it's going to be great. Like, you can talk to 20-year-olds for, you know, whatever, like, an hour and 15 minutes. You're going to be great.
Thanks.
I was thinking, you know, like, if you can do that, what does it feel similar for you, like teaching and doing comedy?
Absolutely. It feels really, really similar. And I get the same energy from the audience when I do comedy as I do from my students.
Right.
You know, I started out teaching high school. And that's a tough audience. Like they, if you are not authentically funny, they will let you know, like, miss, do not do that again. You know, you're being fake, you're being a poser. This is old school talk because I taught a long time ago. But I would tell stories to my students, and they would, you know, if I wasn't telling funny stories about my kids for a week, they'd be like, it's time. We need another story.
We demand another story.
Yeah, and also, you know, teaching those tough subjects. So it feels a lot like that. And then I've been a keynote speaker for quite a while now. And I would tell the story of the secret kindness agents and tell those funny stories. And then one day this little old Italian grandma was like, you should do standing up comedy. And I was like, okay. Like, you're like the seventh person to tell me this. Maybe I should explore this situation. And then shoved it away because it terrified me. And then Josh was kind enough to ask me. And I was like, maybe this is a sign that I should be trying to do this and push myself a little bit. Yeah. So thank you, Josh, for that opportunity.
That's super cool. All right.
That's super cool. If it means anything, on that day, I just assumed you'd been doing it for a very long time.
I appreciate that so much. My goodness, thank you.
So I want to talk about the relationship between teaching and then writing for comedy. When you're a teacher, like, a lot of things can happen in a classroom. Funny, tragic, the whole range. How do you select those stories to draw out into the stand-up set? And then also, I guess I'm curious, you know, your course load at UNO is cultural awareness and education. That's one of the classes that you teach.
Yep, culturally responsive teaching.
So I'm wondering if, like, some of the stand-up is coming from that. If you get a chance to, like, refine bits there, then bring them in, or if that's been the case.
Yeah, so when I'm selecting stories to tell, I always think of the ones that make me, you know, giggle snort when I'm thinking about it after class. I'm like, wow, that was hilarious. So those are the ones, or when I'm telling my family at home and they seem to find it funny, then I'll be like, okay, that's something that I should do. But I've always been a storyteller, and that's my comedy style, I guess. And I tell stories all the time to my friends. You know, I'm reminiscing about my day, or I'm trying to process what happened. And if they giggle snort, then you know that that's something that might work on stage. So that's sort of how I pick my pieces. But, you know, kids are just also naturally funny.
Yeah.
Like, my high schoolers were just natural. It didn't matter how bad life was or what had just happened. They were a lot like me and my family growing up. Like, we connected. We had kind of the same humor. So it's like the regular humor that teachers have, but then with the kind of, I don't even know how to, like, just weird humor that comes with high schoolers from different, because I would connect with all of them. And so kind of that's how I pick it out, is it's just already there. And I talk with folks about it and test it out on, you know, I didn't realize I was testing it out. I was just like, this is what I talk about.
Sort of happened naturally.
It just sort of happened, and then I'm like, well, if these folks find it funny, maybe I should put that on the stage and see what happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering if we could maybe listen to a little bit of your stand-up, the set, in fact. We'll kind of play it here, and then maybe ask you some questions about it afterwards.
Oh, okay, sure.
It's funny, we got the same reaction from Cameron last time.
Yeah.
It won't be too rough.
All right. Hello, shiny happy people. As Dylan said, my name is Ferial Pearson, but it wasn't always Ferial Pearson. I got married back in the day, like 20 years ago. I'm a feminist, but I changed my name because my maiden name was Ferial Muhammad, and that auto-corrected to terrorist. So I changed it to Ferial Pearson, but now it just autocorrects to Ferial Pearson, which doesn't help. But my name is Ferial, like the mermaid with an F, but not fermaid. That's my spouse over there, the tall white man. Say hello. Not a dangerous Muslim, I'm with him. But when I first introduced myself, I was like, my name is Ferial, like the mermaid with an F, and he was like, so fermaid. And I was like, we come from a hairy people, sir. But you don't get to say that. But I married him anyway, because I'm a sucker for punishment, I guess. We, like Zach, are also old. We are in our 40s. I am 43. And you're like, drop the skincare routine. Why'd you look so young? It's chubby cheeks and racism. Keeps me looking young. That's what I do. I'm passionate about a lot of things. I'm passionate about dresses with pockets. This one has real pockets, 2 of them, deep ones. Look at that. You can put lots of things in there. I keep the patriarchy in one, white supremacy in the other one. And I just look for trash cans to throw bits of it into, because that's what makes me happy. You know. Let's see, what else do I want to tell you? I'm a teacher. I came to people like, why are you in Omaha? You grew up in Kenya, like perpetual spring. You know, where your people are, where people don't hate you because of the way you look and dress and etc. You know. But I came to Omaha because I got a job as a teacher. How many of you are here because of a job? No? Good choice. How many of you are here because of family? You tried to get away, but it sucked you back in. Yeah. I did that to the poor tall white man. He was from Omaha. I got a job in Omaha, and he's like, I thought I finally left. And I was like, too bad, so sad, man. So we are here. We've been living in Omaha for 20 years. Like I said, I'm old. We have 2 teenagers. I got a job as a teacher. How many of you have had teachers? So you'll understand some of the things I tell you about teaching. It gets real awkward sometimes. Any people have awkward moments with teachers? All right, so back in the day when I started teaching, I was teaching at Omaha South High. I was an English teacher there. You know, trundling my computer in on the cart, the gurney, as Zach called it. But we were trying to teach our students spell check in English class. Yes, how many of you have used spell check? It's gotten a lot better recently. But back in the day, we were teaching the students to use spell check. I was teaching American Lit, and I told my students, you have to write an essay about the American dream. So Nicholas decided to write his essay about the American dream, and he used spell check, and I took it home at night, and I was grading it, right? And I read it, and I went back to school the next day, and I said, Nicholas, I need to see you after class. And he came up, and he's like, what's up? I was like, I want you to read the first line of your essay for me. You know, I just want you to read it aloud. So he looks at it for a second, and he looks at me, and he's like, everyone's entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I said, no, Nicholas, I want you to read what you said, what you actually wrote in the paper. He said, okay. So he looks at the paper, and he reads very carefully. Everyone is entitled to life, liberty, and oh my God. And I was like, sir, do you actually believe that everybody's entitled to a prostitute of happiness? Sir? He was like, I swear I wrote pursuit. I used spell check. I said, yes, you very much spelled prostitute correctly, Nicholas. Here it is on your essay. You know, that was an awkward moment. He didn't make eye contact for like 3 months. He was like, I can't, because every time I looked at him, I was like, prostitute of happiness. It was great. I give my students nicknames, okay? They give me nicknames as well. They call me Mama Beast. Any of you ever called a teacher mom by mistake? Yes. How many of you called mom on purpose? I knew it. So that happened to me. Never mind that I was 23 and my students were 21 sometimes, but they called me mom, which was cool. But then after a couple years, I started to develop a reputation. You know, kids, you know, their siblings take you and then they hear about you and they hear from their friends. And so I was there in the classroom and they're like, we're going to call you the Beast. And I was highly offended. I was like, that's not a nice thing to call somebody. I did not grow up in this country, but I know a beast is a bad thing. I've seen Beauty and the Beast, like it's not cool. I did my makeup today. And they were like, no, miss, it means you're good at what you do. It means you're beastie. You're in beast mode. It means you're good at what you do. I was like, I grew up in Africa and I do not believe you. And they're like, no, go look it up. You should look it up on the internet. There's a thing called Urban Dictionary. So I went on the internet and I looked up Urban Dictionary, which I had never been on before. Have any of you been on the Urban Dictionary? Okay, I saw things that I could not scrub my eyeballs clean from, all right? But they said, yes, if you're a beast, you're good at what you do. So I was like, all right, I'll take it. So then I started looking at other things. you know, because it's interesting and also hilarious. And then I was horrified because I went to school the next day and I told the students, it's cool that you call me the Beast, you can call me Mama Beast, that's cool. However, Trevor, I need to see you after class. So Trevor comes after class and I was like, Trevor, you know that nickname that I've been calling you all year? And that you giggle at every time I call you this nickname? He was like, yes. I was like, you know I went to Urban Dictionary last night. And he was like, oh no. I said, I've been calling you teabag. For months. I've been calling you teabag. I've been calling you a scrotum. I've been calling you testicles. Vas deferens. Should I go on? And he was like, oh my God. I said, why didn't you stop me? He was like, you were just so proud of it. I couldn't even, you know, it was fine. Also, couldn't make eye contact with me for months. It's just the way it goes. So awkward moments all the time, but sometimes there's a lot of fun and there are little teachable moments that you can have. I'm sure you've all had a teacher who taught you something useful. I think the most useful lesson I ever taught was my kid Ernie, secret kindness agent Blaze. So Ernie came to me after school. All the students embraced this idea of kindness, so they developed their signature moves and they would go do these acts of kindness that were their signature moves, some of them real random. One lady made somebody cry while she was doing acts of kindness because he littered, and she was like, I did not come from Africa to pick up your trash, come with me, let's go. And poor dude was like, I wasn't even thinking. Anyway, so Ernie came in, and he was like, Miss, you gotta help me. I was like, Ernie, you're looking a little flushed, do you have a fever? He's like, I know my face is red, it's just that people keep slapping me, miss, and I don't know what to do about it. And I was like, your friends? Because friends don't slap friends, Ernie? He was like, no, it's not friends, it's the strangers. And I said, why? What? What are you doing right before the strangers are slapping you? He's like, well, I'm hugging them. And I said, Ernie, why are you hugging strangers? He's like, they look sad, and I just sort of launched myself at them to give them a hug, and then they slapped me, and I was like, I see the problem. So what happens is, some of us have what we call resting sad face. You know, we're not actually sad, so you gotta go, are you sad? Say no. No. That's okay. And then you go to somebody else, are you sad? Say yes, Mike. Would you like a hug? Say no. How about a fist bump instead? Cool. So we practiced. He came back, a week later, and he's like, this consent thing is magical. I haven't been slapped in a week. And I was like, yes, go tell all your friends, Ernie. All your friends. That's my time. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, well, thanks for sitting with us through your set. I know that might have been painful.
It was so hard.
Yeah, I understand. I'm a musician, as well, and I understand listening back. We are our own worst critic.
We sure are.
Yeah, I want to say that everyone else, I certainly enjoyed it. I've listened to it, 10 times now, mixing the audio and stuff. No, it was great, okay? Great. There's a lot of little nuances that go on that are really rewarding to sort of wrestle with. And speaking of which, we had some questions kind of specific to the set and some elements. If I wanted to ask, so something I noticed, and I certainly felt it just being in the audience, is I feel like there was a very inviting, sense. So as much as you absolutely, you came out swinging with some pretty on topic, jokes, that very much just attack racism and it addresses, confronts those things. There was a very inviting nature to the set. I feel like I was like, oh yeah, I'm here to, I'm listening. And I wanted to ask you about, are you consciously thinking about how you can bring in an audience? Are you thinking about okay, so I want to say this, how do I bring these people in who maybe have different ideas? Maybe they don't think like I do about these things, or can you walk me through what that's like for you? Are you thinking about those things while you're up here?
Not consciously. Okay. I think I used to think about that a whole lot when I started teaching, because I was coming to teach in a new country, on a new continent. Right. I didn't know anything about it, and even my student teaching I had done in small town Minnesota, and so here I was teaching in one of the largest urban schools in the state, right, at South High, and I was like nobody there. First of all, I was the only Muslim in the building, the only one. There wasn't a student or an adult. Wow. There were rumors of a past Afghani teacher, but she had gone to California and she came back. She's hilarious. But I was the only Muslim in the building. I was, the only immigrant teacher at the time. The school was still immigrant grandkids, from Poland and Czechoslovakia and places like that. But right. I was the very different person. And my students were unlike any students I've ever had. And I went to school in the British system. So if you've read the Harry Potter books, that's what we were like. And so it was like you stand up when the teacher comes in, you wear a uniform. You earn points for your house.
Really?
And all of those
Was that an
kinds of
aspect?
Yes. So I was the Hermione Granger of my school.
Oh my goodness.
I was like, had curly hair, like the whole deal.
Yeah.
And I was prefect, and then I became head girl of the school, and I was RA of the girls' dorm, like the whole thing. And then I get to Omaha South High School, and I was like, wait a minute. Some of these children have not eaten. Some of these children have like real life issues. These kids are not just going to sit and listen to me because that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
I have to win them over.
I see.
So I practiced that a whole lot, and I, growing up with a lot of scary things happening to me, I've always been hypervigilant. So I'm always watching people's body language. I'm always, really concerned with how their feelings are, and because I knew people who would pop off, like one little thing would set them off, and you'd need to be able to get to safety. So I think that really helped. My therapist helped me figure that out.
Of course,
Therapy should be for all. It's like a massage for the brain.
I agree.
Yes. And so I think that really helps. And so, in education, we talk about something called automaticity, where you practice something over and over. You're a musician, you know this.
Right.
If you practice things enough, then they start to come automatically to you. And so I think that's my reading of the audience, is the way I've always read not only my students, but like people around me. And since being hate crimed,
Right.
is that a verb? It now is.
I know, it's scary that it has been transformed into a verb.
Yes. So since being hate crimed a couple of times and having to watch my back, that hypervigilance has only been stepped up. And I used to think it was a terrible thing, because it is a terrible thing. But my therapist was like, that's what makes you a good teacher. And I think it helps with the comedy piece as well, because I'm able to pivot and be flexible on stage based on what I'm seeing in the audience.
Yeah. And speaking of which, too, during the break there, we were discussing a little bit about being on stage, and I didn't realize how much of the set that we just heard was improvised, that you kind of reacted, and what an excellent example of being on a swivel, being able to react. I didn't even realize. Who knew?
Yeah, it's quite impressive, because there's this moment early on in the set where you make the joke about I'm passionate about pockets.
Yeah.
And there is this, I've been thinking a lot about the kindness, the Secret Agents of Kindness Project. Did I just butcher that?
Secret Kindness Agents,
Secret
right?
Kindness Agents, because the acronym goes to ska, and I like ska music, so that's how that
fantastic.
Hey, all right.
happened. So now you know.
You're a fan of ska.
I'm a fan of
Oh my
ska.
goodness. Wow.
Muslim immigrant woman from Africa really likes ska.
That's magnificent. I love that.
But there's kind of this this wonderful thing that you do on stage, where you show your pockets, and then you say, I keep the patriarchy in one and white supremacy in the other.
Yeah.
And I throw out little bits of it in the trash as I go along.
Yeah.
And this seems to me quite significant, because your activism in the community it's like a function of you owning the injustice of the community in a way, or feeling it in a very close way, and then piecing it out in the ways that you can to throw it to the side.
Right.
And I guess I'm curious to know if you're aware of that as a person that is teaching students, that is lecturing publicly, giving TED Talks, educating educators. Are you holding them close and their problems close in a sense, and then kind of acting out to help them in a way?
Yeah, absolutely. I've always felt responsible for people around me. I'm the oldest of 4 girls, so it's like,
Oh, I see. Yeah.
it's the oldest child syndrome.
I'm older sibling. I'm also the oldest sibling, so I
There you
understand.
go. So you get it. Like,
Yeah.
if they do something wrong, it's your fault.
Yeah.
I remember being in America, and my younger sister did something in Africa, and my dad called me to yell at me about it. And I was like, dude, I'm not even there. Okay. So yeah, I've always felt responsible for other people. I've always felt this need to take care of people because of that. My mom was sick, when I was growing up, and couldn't really be much help when it came to things that were happening. And then I was in boarding school, and I was RA and head girl, and people would come to me for help. And so I I guess people tell me things about their life sometimes that I don't even want to know.
Yeah.
And those of you who've had English teachers, like it's always the English teachers. People got to, tell the things too.
Yep.
So I would hear all these stories and they would just break my heart. Kids would just, there was this one kid who, he got detention on purpose for like 5 days. And I was like, what is wrong with you? You know the line, you can't. I lied to my class and said that chewing gum was against my culture because I couldn't handle it. I was like, they would sit in the front and just, and I'm like, how am I supposed to concentrate? So I was like, it's against my culture. And they're like, oh, so sorry, miss. And so then they would throw it away. Nice. So this kid, 5 days in a row, in the front row. And I was like, dude, you know what? And he's like, yep, I'm going to be in detention. And he didn't want to go home. And then after like the 5th day, I said, okay, detention's over, you can go home. And he was like, actually, I want to talk to you about something. And he disclosed that he had been abused by his stepdad. And so I heard things like that. I would see evidence of all the isms, right? I would see people being discriminated against, people being oppressed. I heard about hate crimes. This was all new to me. Like, this wasn't what we grew up with in Kenya. I heard about Matthew Shepard. We had a student at North who had graduated, gone to UNL, and then he died by suicide. And, the God Hates Fags people came over, and I was just watching my GSA kiddos and how that affected them. And I just thought, as adults, and me in particular, I can go home and get away from some of this stuff, even when I got hate crimed. Like, I could leave that school district and go home, or even move. The second time it happened, we had to move our family because of death threats. But the whole time I was thinking about the kids who have no choice but to go back to that school day in and day out, face those death threats, face that kind of assault and harassment. And if they're brave enough to go into school every day, then who am I to be like, well, I'm just going to look away. I'm just going to, think of my own comfort, and let them go out there and do the hard stuff. So I think that's a big part of it. But getting to know the types of people that I know, I'm not in a bubble. That's something that I think I have, that's a privilege, not growing up here, not being like anybody else, is my friend group doesn't look like me, think like me, worship like me. They're all very different.
Yeah.
And so I get to hear about what they go through that I don't go through. And so I have knowledges of all these lived experiences. And when they're happening to people you care about, it's really hard to just remain kind of neutral or turn the other way.
Yeah.
That is a very compelling sort of situation that you bring up, because I think there's always, so I grew up in Topeka, Kansas, which is the home of that church.
Yes,
that
Westboro Baptist Church.
Westboro Baptist. I knew some of the kids who grew up in that space, and there was this, what a complicated sort of issue to face with. Like, obviously children or young people, do they know? There's that aspect, and then on top of that, being like an educator or being in those situations, knowing when, and I'm going to phrase this in a question, but
Sure.
when someone is bringing up something, personal, and I actually asked Josh this because, being a professor, and this is something I'm interested in because I've taught some courses and classes before, not to the extent that you guys have, absolutely, but
I'd be really impressed if you had.
Yeah, I know. 23.
You were looking good at 40, buddy.
Yeah.
You are killing it.
Yep. Growing up in the Catholic Church, doing religious education classes, of course, and teaching creative writing. I don't think I'm quite at your guys' level yet, but
You're going to surpass us at some point.
We'll see. I've always thought if I was going to be a teacher, I want to be a good one, you know, and this is an aspect of that, I think. What do you do when someone's bringing up these very serious issues and things? And I want to kind of ask you, I know it's a tough question, but what do you do when a student or when someone opens up and says, hey, this thing is happening? Can you kind of sort of enlighten us in what you've done in the past, what you think maybe should be done? How do people interact in those situations? What are you supposed to do,
Yeah, well, first of all, I always tell them at the beginning of the semester, I'm a mandatory reporter. Every adult in the state of Nebraska is a mandatory reporter. And so if you tell me something that lets me know you're being hurt or someone else is being hurt or someone's about to be hurt, I have to tell somebody. So just know that off the bat. But then also, I think it's more about listening than it is about doing.
I see.
When they disclose those things. It's called graceful acts of listening, right? Where you don't, and Brene Brown has a really great video out there on YouTube. It's animated about the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Ooh, okay.
And I know, having been through some stuff, I hate it. I hate it when people feel sympathy or when they feel pity, because it feels very condescending and disconnected. Whereas empathy is when somebody feels with you. They may not have been through the exact same situation, but they've had that emotion. We all know what it feels like to be sad or angry or heartbroken or, super furious. We all know those feelings. Right. And so I can sit with somebody and let them feel their feelings without trying to fix it, without trying to, she calls it silver lining it, at least this didn't happen.
Well, at least that's
or saying what, my experience is around that too, and centering myself. So it's about not centering ourselves, but just being there in that dark place with somebody. And she says that very rarely does a response fix anything anyway. So just saying something like, I'm really glad you told me. I don't know what to say, but thank you for telling me. Or my favorite question is, how can I support you?
Yeah.
And then they'll tell me. And sometimes it's, just listening really helped. Or, will you just come with me to wherever I need to go to do whatever I need to do? So that's really my biggest advice is listen, with the intent to understand, and then ask how you can support.
Yeah. You
don't need to fix it all the time.
How can I support you? That's a powerful thing.
It's such a wise approach. I mean, and I know what you mean. I feel the compulsion to be like, oh, we got to go to the cops, or
we got to fix it.
Solve the problem.
We got to talk to that person,
Yes.
But it's there really is as a teacher kind of a limit to the resources that you can bear on a situation.
Yeah, and we also have to avoid that whole saviorism piece. Like, I am not a fan of those teacher movies where like the teacher goes and saves the poor children. I'm like, no.
Right.
We're not there to save anybody. We're there to be in solidarity with people, right? I'm going to stand next to you or sit next to you. I'm not going to be in front of you. I'm not going to speak over you. You are a powerful human being just by yourself. And that saviorism happens when I'm so sorry for these kids and I'm going to do these things for them.
Right.
And sometimes saviors make it worse. We've all have friends who tried to fix something for us and they didn't ask us first. They made it worse. And you're like, if you had just asked me, I would have told you to not to, right?
Excellent point.
This is underlined so well in your comedy set with the example of Ernie, who was
Ernie who got slapped.
You were like,
poor Ernie.
Yes.
You were like, that was true empathy in that situation. Where you're like, tell me exactly what happened. Okay,
what happened
we're
right
gonna
before?
Practice.
Why are we getting slapped, Ernie?
But I was impressed as a educator, because I think that the impulse of a lot of educators would be like, all right, that's just we're going to leave that behind, but to use it as a teaching moment, and to really kind of sit there with the kid who's, he's probably embarrassed, or he's, feels weird about himself. Probably if he's doing that or taking that approach, maybe not the most socially couth character. But that's kind of a beauty of your teaching. But also, I mean, that comedy set, it was, it was quite compelling. I was compelled too by your TED Talk from TEDx Omaha. I think it was like 2015 or so.
I think it was 2014. I have not seen my TED Talk, so I can't recommend it. I did not. I watched 10 seconds of it, almost passed out. I was like, it's a sign. I should not be watching this.
It was great.
It's interesting to me that both our guests have had TEDx talks. Cameron Logsdon as well had a TEDx talk.
Yeah, his is amazing.
So was yours. Don't cut yourself short.
I've seen his. I haven't seen mine. And I have no memory of it. All I remember is the big timer that was at my feet, and they were like, do not go over 18 minutes.
Yes, were they like, there's a hard deadline,
yes,
right?
There's a hard, and we're going to like clap you off and like stop you.
We're going to start applauding, right?
And then there was a photographer, videographer, like doing acrobatics, like at my feet, like taking photos up my nose, and I was like, I don't know how anybody does this.
I could hear him in the background.
Yes,
I was listening. I was like,
and
I could actually see a little bit like of you being like,
just like looking down.
What you doing?
What are you doing?
Trying to concentrate here and look like a professional.
Those are the aspects of TED Talks that no one ever thinks about, Right. Like, you have to stay focused while this photographer is doing backflips in front of you.
And you were talking about improv. Like, I didn't have my speech memorized.
Really?
And everybody before me had their speech memorized. They had practiced.
Right.
But that's not how I do. Like, if I memorize something and then I forget one line, the rest of it is shot.
Right, you get off and then you start thinking, like, wait, what was that? Oh, no.
So I was like, okay, I'm going to have signposts. Like, I'm going to remember what stories I'm going to tell. My comedy's the same way. And so I was watching all of them. I was one of the last ones. And they all, like, blew it out of the water. And so I'm like being mic'd up, and this poor lady, Haley, who's become a really dear friend, she's like micing me up, and I start having this massive panic attack, and I start crying, and my eyelash is coming off, and she's like, and I was like, I can't do this. I'm going. I'm leaving. Not about it anymore. You know, I did the same thing when I was giving birth. Like when it was the worst of it, I was like, I changed my mind. I want to go home. This is not. Let me just leave. And Haley was like, if you don't do this, nobody's gonna know how cool your students are. And I was like, I hate you, Haley. So I had to do it. But you can't see that, I think, hopefully, in the TED Talk, that I was a hot mess.
No, I thought it was again like a lot of like seeing your set and other aspects. It seemed, you know, totally under control. Your point was clear. Also, I've read, so I wanted to talk a little bit, you know, while we have some time to talk about these things.
Sure.
Your book a little bit too, or at least just bring it up. I know you probably get asked all the time about your book, but
not as much as you think.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting. I'll come clean and be honest. I read the first 20 pages because they were available on Google for free, so I was able to like read through. I might just purchase it later and read the whole thing.
Just let me know. I'll send you a copy.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you. Very nice. And I noticed some similarities between your TED Talk and the introduction to your book.
Yeah.
You know, this idea, first and foremost, I want to ask you how the secret kindness agents are doing, you know, how the concept and how, you know, it's been probably 10 years since
it was the spring of 2013, so 8 years or so. Wow, that's a long time.
Wow, the years just fly by, don't they? But I'm very curious about where that's at, or have you seen things sort of change with the secret kindness agents, especially during the pandemic? You know, what has that been like? Where are the agents at? Where's the agency at?
So secret kindness agents kind of blew up against my will and consent.
Oh my!
So, it started with Ayali telling a newspaper reporter, Adam Klinker from the Recorder, Charleston Recorder.
Okay.
He was at school. I wasn't there, and she marched up to him, and she's like, "Have I got a story for you?"
Oh boy!
And I was like, "We were supposed to be secret, Ayali."
That's right.
So then there was a news story, and then a friend of mine dared me to apply to do the TED Talk. And when people dare you, you have to like gauge, is this a dare I can do? Will I lose face? And I looked at the application, I was like, oh, it's 4 questions. And they'll never pick a teacher. So that's an easy dare. You know how that turned out.
Well, I guess you won that bet. That's a question mark.
So, between the TED Talk and the newspaper article, and then I started a Facebook page because the students told me to. Everything I've ever done in my life has been somebody else's idea. So I'm really bad at saying no, especially to kids and friends. And so with the TED Talk, the Facebook page, and the newspaper articles, people started to hear about it, and they would ask me, how do I do this? And then the book, and the book was kind of a how-to for not just teachers, but like families, or just like you and your bestie. And I have rogue agents out there's like rogue agent Gemini, who's 13, who saw the TED Talk, messaged me on Facebook, and it was like, Agent Gemini reporting for duty.
Nice.
Today my act of kindness was recruiting my mother, Agent Aquarius, and we are now double agents. And I was like, cool. Wow. Excellent.
People are it seems to me like a fandom has
it
sort
has
of built
become
around.
that way. And it's not, I've never spent a penny on marketing. Like, I don't do any of that because this is not my job. Like, I am not paid to do this. This is something that kids created that I was just like, okay, how can I help?
Sure.
And so it's now in over 500 schools worldwide. It's in 8 different countries.
Wow.
I Skyped with kids in Quebec and was like trying to remember my French.
Yeah.
It's in Cameroon and in Fiji and Australia and all kinds of different places. And then it got picked up by Hallmark. They did a short, like, commercial length documentary in 2017. And it was funny because they emailed me and I was like, to my spouse, hey, look how creative the spammers are. They're pretending to be Hallmark. And he was like, nah, on LinkedIn he really does work for Hallmark. And I was like, I would not like to be on the television. You may have guessed this by now. But I do know a teacher who's doing this here in Omaha at Skinner Magnet Elementary School. Her name's Carolyn Roby. Agent Boss Lady is what her name is.
Boss Lady.
Everyone gets an agent name, Agent Boss Lady. She'd been doing it for a while, and so they went to Skinner and they did this commercial. And then it played every commercial break that they showed the Christmas Train movie, and it showed like 8 times over Thanksgiving break.
Wow.
And so now it's getting like bombarded with messages from
sure,
people
yeah.
like, how do I do this in Alaska with my preschool class? How do I do
Yeah.
like all these places? And I was like, I had never taught preschool. I have never been to Alaska. I'm a
Yeah.
lady from the equator. We don't do those climates. But so it kind of blew up, and newspaper articles started coming out about other people doing the project. Lady Gaga's Born This Way Foundation did the project with a 5th grade class.
Wow.
Teaching Tolerance magazine, it's now Learning for Justice, but it's read by teachers throughout the world. They contacted me, do you know a teacher in California? I was like, yes, I do. And so they followed her in her high school class, and that came out in the fall of 2017. And then this year, like during the pandemic, where I thought everything would be dead, Midwest Living magazine just this fall or this summer. And then I've done 2 different things for Parents magazine. So they put out a webinar that I was a part of a couple months ago, and they did a kindness issue in the fall of last year and interviewed me for that. And I just spoke to a Parents magazine writer yesterday. So there's
Really?
another one coming out. So and again, it's been weird. Like, I'm not looking for y'all. Like,
Yeah.
why do you keep coming out of the woodwork, freaking me out? Remember all this stuff. And we do have a second book now.
Okay.
So I actually did my dissertation on studying the impact of the project.
That's fascinating.
And
yeah.
so the first half of the second book, and this one is specifically for adults working with kids. So the first half is the research, the literature about kindness education, and then the research on the actual Secret Kindness Agents project. And then the second half is 23 different people who've done the project from preschool through university to rogue agents out there. And one of my original agents, Agent Kasia, was in the UNO Secret Kindness Agents. They have their own logo, like they're serious about this stuff, okay?
my
And they're
goodness.
super secret, like you don't know who
So
they are.
it is a secret. It's a
Yes,
secret kindness
and so
agency.
she
Gotcha.
became a part of that group, and she was like, Miss, she called me up and she's like, Mama Beast. So I'm part of the UNO Secret Kindness Agents, and I went in and I was like fully intending not to tell them that I was one of the original people. And then they were like, what's your agent name going to be? And then I just blurted out, I'm just going to use my same old agent name. And they were like, what? And so she wrote a chapter as well in that book, and it just came out in December.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that. And I
Yeah.
didn't realize all those nuances of like how I even doing some research, I just
Yeah.
didn't have an idea of like how it all happened.
Like I said, I have no marketing
Yeah,
budget or
sometimes-
plan. Like my publisher is not a fan of that. She would much prefer I spend like thousands of dollars.
Sure, I can
marketing and advertising.
Oh
Yeah.
my.
Well, we've reached the point in the podcast where we switch out professors on this side of the table. Faith Gertaika is a producer of the show. I should say the producer of the show. She is an associate professor of English at Creighton University, and we thought we'd end with Faith asking a few questions. Is that all right?
Yeah, of course. Fellow
Okay.
English teacher. I'm like, yes.
One of my English professors, in fact. I mean, so is Josh,
Fantastic.
but you know.
Yeah.
Our user's sweaty.
Very smooth transition as always.
Yes.
We're
Indeed. Oh, thanks. Improv all the way.
improv all the time.
Hello.
Hello.
We can
Oh,
hear
this
you.
sounds
Hear
really
yourself?
good. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, so great to hear about you. I wanted to ask, this leads in well from our previous question. When I was watching your TED Talk, which was 2014, I just feel like the whole world was different in 2014.
It really was.
It feels like 10,000 years ago as opposed to 6 years ago. And I guess I was interested in how your ideas about kindness have changed, your philosophy of kindness have changed, the acts that you see your kindness agents doing have changed.
Yeah.
I just want to see what you're looking back on what kindness meant in 2014 versus what it means now.
I think in 2014, it wasn't like a huge piece of my life. Like it wasn't a part of me necessarily, even though I had been raised by very, very kind people. My parents and my grandparents were always overly generous. They were always, doing things for other people. When my grandfather died, they had to find somewhere else to have his funeral because so many people showed up. Wow. And we had no idea. We're like, he paid for this person's education. He did this and the other for people, from people who were living on the streets to people who were ambassadors, around the world. And when we went to give away his clothing, there was nothing there. And I was ticked because I would come back from America every summer and bring him a gift. And I was like, where are these gifts? And he's like, oh, somebody else needed it more. That's just who he was. And so I had that kind of upbringing. To us in our faith. Kindness and service are a form of prayer. And so unlike other Muslims, and this is kind of why they're like, you're not really Muslim, because we don't stop everything and pray at those prescribed 5 times of the day. Because our imam says if you're doing a form of service, that is prayer. You don't stop tending to a patient or teaching a student, or nursing somebody or taking care of somebody on the side of the road because it's time to pray. That is prayer. Right. So it's kind of embedded in who I am and the way I was raised, but I wasn't thinking about kindness in terms of what it meant in my teaching, how I approached my pedagogy and my classroom management, and how I was approaching kids. So I hadn't been intentional about it, I guess is what I'm saying. And now it's become a much more intentional thing, and it's become trying to think about kindness in terms of what it means for our humanity as opposed to doing charity. So again, it's that difference between sympathy and empathy. It's like kindness comes from empathy if it's really kindness. If it's coming from sympathy, it's coming from that saviorism that, oh, poor you, I need to help you so I can feel better about myself, so I can get allyship cookies, so I can get the photo op. Right. And coming from Africa, like those things really get on my last nerve. People coming in to take a photo with a poor black kid, donate some things and then never think about them again. That to me is not true kindness. And then just having it become a habit, in our class, it was every week, and it just became a part of who we were. And I saw that reflected in the research that I did, where, teachers were saying if we skipped our routine, if we skipped our ceremony for the week, the kids were like, excuse me, we need to stop and do our kindness thing, right, and move on, because they got their happiness from it. They got addicted to it. Yeah. And so it became a habit at school, but it also became a habit at home. Because I talked to my kids about kindness and about what had happened in Sandy Hook. So we all have what we call our signature moves now. Nice. And then it's also changed in the way that we thought about kindness and how it relates to social justice, and how it relates to being Nebraska nice. You're not supposed to, and especially as a cisgender woman, we are taught everywhere I've ever lived, you're supposed to be polite and you're supposed to be quiet and you're not supposed to make waves and don't make people uncomfortable. You're supposed to be Nebraska nice, brush things under the rug, don't make people angry. And the more injustice that I've seen, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, the more I'm like, no, that is not kind. Mm-hmm. It is not kind to allow suffering to continue and just let it go, just so you don't make the bigots uncomfortable. Right?
Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about how you sort of explain that to students, especially you were talking about multi-level, and I'm the parent of a preschooler, and I'm like, how would I explain this idea of kindness as opposed to just not charity and not sympathy, but empathy? Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the language you use or tools or skills?
Yeah, with littles, we talk a lot, I talk a lot with littles about, how would you feel if something like this happened to you? So connecting to their emotions. Talking about they've got all the big emotions. Tiny people have the biggest emotions. Why are you crying? Because you cut my sandwich in squares. You asked me to cut my sandwich in squares. But you didn't yesterday. They have the big emotions. So let's connect to those big emotions when you were really, really sad or somebody really, really hurt you. What do you wish somebody would have done? And I talk about the same way when I talk about allyship with I just did an activism camp, Secret Kindness Agents Activism Camp. Mm-hmm. Did it for 11 to 13-year-olds, 14 through 19, and then adults. And we did the exact same sequence of workshops where we talked about power and privilege and intersectionality. So when you have the power to make something better, then you have to use that power, because like Uncle Ben said, with great power comes great responsibility. And so when you are aware of the power that you have as a white person or as an able-bodied person or so on, you have a responsibility to do something good with that, right? Otherwise, you'd be like if somebody pointed out to Spider-Man or to Superman, you have these superpowers, and they felt just guilty and shamed about it, and they sat in a corner and just felt bad about it, nothing good would get done. Mm-hmm. So we talk with people of all ages about how would it feel? Connect to how that feels within yourself, and what is it that you wish folks would do. Mm-hmm. And it's also about just being a good friend. I talk about friendship a lot in terms of allyship with young people. What does it mean to be a good friend? Is it okay to see somebody hurting and not say anything and ask if they're okay? Is it okay to just stand and watch while somebody's being mean to somebody? Maybe we could just go and stand next to them so that people that they're not alone. It's those tiny, tiny acts of kind of affirmation that you have to do, but talking about it not just in terms of social justice, but flipping that and saying that's actually the same as kindness. It also helps to avoid those like trigger words that people have, like you're a social justice warrior. Right. No, I care about kindness. What I'm doing is kindness. Are you against kindness?
Yeah, you know? Against being
bigot?
Nice. Yeah, being a good person. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
There's. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I could ask questions all day.
I was gonna say, how are we doing on time? Okay. So I had one thing that I just wanted to say very quickly was I have no idea if this is related to secret kindness agents, but I like to think so in my mind. When I had first moved to Omaha, I was, in downtown. I was in the old market, and I walked up to my car and I saw a slip on my windshield. And I was like, I got a ticket. I can't believe it. You know, like this is just cherry on top of this horrible week I was having. And I opened it up, and inside it just said, "I hope you have a wonderful day," and that you're, And I was like, that was lovely. What a simple, tiny little act of kindness that really went a long way and made me feel special,
Absolutely.
And I didn't know if that was, related, but in my mind, I like to think that in some way, a secret kindness agent really, really helped me out that day.
Yeah, it probably was.
Absolutely.
Probably was.
Did you have anything you would like to plug for the future? Events, books, anything we can find?
I do have a Patreon, Secret Kindness Agents Patreon. So you can become a patron and you can earn some Secret Kindness Agent swag.
Perfect.
A Secret Kindness Agent designed our logo and did some artwork for us. So you can get buttons and bumper stickers about kindness. You can also get signed books, the first and the second book. You can get art done by people who are Secret Kindness Agents. So become a patron, and you also get assignments once in a while on there just for patrons. We do have a podcast, and I'm hoping to get more guests and get that up and running now that Agent the Malfoot's kid has grown up a little bit.
Right.
And so there's the podcast, a couple of books that are available, and I just found out, and this is so exciting. So the first book is available in Spanish as an audiobook, an ebook, and a regular paperback. It's also available now. It's going to be in Braille and in large font.
Wow, okay.
And the same thing with the second book, which is an audiobook, regular book, and will be in Braille and large font at the moment. So go find us on that. Find us on social media as well, Facebook. Instagram was just taken over by a 13-year-old agent yesterday, Agent Liquid Curly Person. Who's running our Instagram now, and we have a Twitter, not super active, but I'm working on it. So and find me if you ever want me to come and speak to kids or your organization or anything like that. I love coming in and talking to groups about how they can be agents as well.
Exactly. What was the name of the podcast that you?
The Secret Kindness Agents.
Secret Kindness Agents.
Yep.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure.
Is that the socials as well? The social.
Yeah.
Okay.
Secret Kindness Agents on all of them.
Excellent.
Caleb, I think we have to end by giving ourselves Secret Kindness Agent names.
That's true.
I think that's a great idea.
What's your secret kindness?
Okay, I didn't think that far, Caleb. I just thought of the idea. Can you tell us yours, Ferial?
So I'm Mama Beast.
Mama Beast.
That's right. Okay.
That's what my students called me. I should probably change it now that everybody knows who I am. It's not secret anymore. But that's what it is right now.
When I was a kid, which this connects me very much to childhood, my mom called me Fluffy. So can I be secret agent Fluffy?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I love that one.
Love that.
Yes.
I think so. When I was in high school, I had a nickname that my friends called me, and I think it would work well. I think I should be Secret Agent Schnappy.
Ooh, yes.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way it rolls off the tongue a little bit.
It does roll off the tongue very well.
Yeah. Well,
Secret Agent Schnappy.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, this was
Thanks so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Alrighty then. Episode 2 out. Thank you, Ferial.
Woo! That was a lot of fun.
We survived.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.